Hello, and welcome to another David OSCPA Small Business Best Practice Series. We're very fortunate to have here with us today Hubert Johnson with Guardian Tax Law. We do a lot of work with Hubert Johnson, doing a lot of cleanups for people who get behind, a lot of foreign bank account reporting work. Hubert is a phenomenal resource in the industry, and we're very fortunate to have found him and be able to work with him. Hubert, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I've been doing tax law since 2009. I kind of fell into it, and I joke around. I tell people that I actually took federal income tax as a tax in tax, not tax, in law school, and I hated it. And then fast forward 10 years, I ended up teaching it. So go figure. Life is funny like that. But I fell into it. Love helping businesses, individuals, and tax law is so confusing and just clarifying things for people and helping individuals and businesses is really the why as to what we do.
I love it. I love it. So digging into the FBAR a little bit, it stands for Foreign Bank Account Reporting. What is the FBAR? Who's legally required to file the FBAR?
So if you're a US citizen or a resident, and that's what catches some people, if you're a resident, a legal resident, and you meet those qualifications and you have more than $10,000 cumulatively in overseas accounts, you are required to do file an FBAR. Now it's just a filing requirement. So as long as you report it, or a reporting requirement, as long as you report it, there's no taxes, there's no penalties. The taxes and penalties come in when you haven't been reporting it. So the IRS just wants to know where your assets are.
But just $10,000 cumulatively at the end of the year, right? Not at any time during the year.
It's actually the highest value throughout the year. So I had one guy who had 100,000 popped into his account in Russia for a week. Someone had died, and his family took the money, put it in his account, and a week later transferred it out. And at the end of the year, he didn't have anything in the account, and he still ran afoul of FBAR and had to comply.
Oh man, that's a bummer. Okay. Well, why do you think, I guess that really is kind of a great explanation there already, but why do you think FBAR compliance is so often overlooked by taxpayers?
There was a lot of talk about FBAR in the news 15, 20 years ago. Again, it's been on the books since the 70s. So it's been around forever. It's not something most people deal with. It's not something that's, it's new and exciting. When they come out with the new program, the tax nerds will talk about it. But it doesn't really get down to the average Joe and people that are just doing their normal life. And sometimes people don't even know they have foreign accounts. It's when they talk to a CPA, a good CPA like you guys, or someone else that will tell them, hey, this is an issue. You need to talk to someone. Other than that, most people do not find out on their own unless they just start searching it up. And that's rare. It's almost always from a CPA that clues them in. This is an issue. This needs to be addressed.
Got it. And what typically happens when a client realizes that they haven't filed for FBAR? How should they react? Because that's
Well, how they should react is get good information. And typically people they go to the internet. That's what we all do. Hey Google. And it scares the bejesus out of them because there are some very nasty penalties. It's good to get informed, and I actually appreciate it when people have done their due diligence. They go and they find out pull up some news articles, read some of the stuff on FBAR, and you can go straight to irs.gov and look up FBAR. There's some good information. But it's not the IRS that handles FBAR. It's actually the U.S. Treasury Department under FinCEN, which is Financial Crimes Unit.
got it. So then there's probably some penalties and that sort of thing that are associated with not filing this, right? That's why people might be freaking out.
Exactly. And so the penalties, there's criminal penalties to this if the IRS investigates you. If they find you first and investigate you, um, not only can you go to jail, but the minimum penalty is 50% of the assets. So it is a huge hurt. And the reason for these laws, FBAR laws and reporting requirements, were to go after crime, mafia, hidden assets, money laundering, this kind of thing, and track down. And so when the IRS would find money, the government would find money, they would use the FBAR to confiscate huge portions of this money that hadn't been reported. Today, with computers and technology and treaties, we have treaties with over 100 countries across the globe. Most countries are reporting foreign assets of American citizens. So the IRS now has that information at their fingertips, and it's so much easier for them to go after people. It's just their inertia that keeps them from going after everybody. So that's the scary part of it.
Got it. Got it. But it sounds like most people don't necessarily know about the FBAR requirements and these penalties. So is there a difference if, the IRS catches me and I knew about it and I willfully didn't file FBAR, or if it was just an accident?
So here's the crazy part, that if they start investigating first, then the main tool to resolve this without and avoid penalties is off the table.
Oh,
Now you're working with their investigators, their prosecutors, their financial crimes unit, and this is where you need a white collar attorney. And I've had people that have called me; they've already started to be investigated. I'm like, I'm not your person. Let me refer you to a white collar criminal defense attorney. They're expensive, they're rare, and that's who you need to be talking to. And I do know some firms that do that, and I have referred people out to those. That's not where you want to be.
yeah.
It's as nasty as it sounds. But if they haven't started investigating you, there's no case on you, then you can deal with it on the civil side, avoid all the criminal penalties. And that's where some of the options open up and that are much nicer, much easier to deal with.
Cool. So with that, once we discover that and, a client wants to be in compliance with FBAR, what options are available to clients who haven't failed, or excuse me, who haven't filed those FBARs in the past?
So there's really two options. And the first one is going to sound a little scary. If you need peace of mind, this is not the option for you. And it's called what's it's called doing a quiet disclosure. So it's where you start reporting, you don't file the back returns, and you just keep your fingers crossed that they don't find you. And then hopefully in 3, 4 years, if someone looks at your case, you will have 3 years of compliance of reporting FBARs. If you go back and amend past returns, you might be raising red flags to the IRS. So the whole idea of doing a quiet disclosure is you start disclosing moving forward, and hopefully nobody looks at those past returns. They will only go back a maximum of 6 years. Now, most people don't want to do that because you're just keeping your fingers crossed that they don't investigate you. The way to protect yourself is to do what's called a streamlined application. This is where you're doing something upfront with the IRS, and the IRS has had other programs in the past. This has been one of the best programs because almost everybody I talked to, they didn't know about it, and it's pretty easy to show that they were non-willful. And you look at the total asset value of the last 3 years, you amend past returns to come into compliance with your past returns. So you're bringing it to their attention, but at the same time, you're submitting a streamlined application with again, an explanation that includes the good, bad, the ugly, um, and really explains the situation. What happened? How did this come about? And so that's where it gets fun, is doing that non-willful argument. And when you submit that, there's a 5% penalty. So you look at the highest balance, cumulative balance throughout the year for all accounts, and it's a 5% penalty from there.
That's not nearly as bad as the 50% penalty we were talking about earlier.
No, and it's doable by most people. Most of the people I've dealt with, it's something that's doable. I had one penalty that was $42,000. But again, we were dealing with an $800,000 asset.
Yep. Okay. So what kind of documentation would you need from a client to get started in that willful disclosure, the streamlined filing compliance procedure?
So, as far as documentation, it really varies by case. So, the main thing you're going to need is either bank statements or financial account statements. And that's number one thing. If you're not sure, first, I would talk to someone first to get the process started. Give us a call, reach out to OCPA, get the process started. But it's going to be bank statements for the last 3 years and all periods that you can get. I've had cases where they could only get quarterly statements. I'm wrestling with one right now where they could only get yearly statements because it was retirement accounts, overseas pensions. I had one case where it took a year and a half to get statements from Morocco, and that they actually had to fly over to Morocco to get those statements. So that made it a lot of fun. But again, we're dealing with foreign statements in different languages, different kinds of assets. In case I had in China, we had not only bank statements in Mandarin, we were getting contracts that were in Dutch and Mandarin. We had real estate deals to show what happened with this because you need the bank statements to do the numbers, but it's not just an argument or legal argument that you're presenting. You need substantiation behind it because the IRS will investigate. So that's why you have to share the good stuff, all the things that help support your case, but you have to disclose the things that cut against you as well, because if they start finding loose threads and things that you didn't report or include, it can unravel pretty quickly and then they'll assume you're hiding stuff from you. And that's where it leads to an investigation. So if you do this, you need to do it right.
Got it. That makes sense. So then, once a client starts working with you for the streamline process, what's a typical timeline if we're not doing the quiet disclosure to resolve this?
Typical timeline is 4 to 5 months, and that's to get all the bank statements. And this is if everything moves smoothly, which rarely does. But we can get this knocked out, get the tax returns amended, working with an excellent CPA firm like OCPA. Um, we get all the documents. We have to go through all the bank statements, and if there's translation services that may be done. I've had more complicated cases like the 800,000 one. That was the one in China. We had to bring in a forensic accountant to go through these bank statements. We had to get things translated. We had to get a lot of additional documents to support the story and prove it up. Because again, telling a story is one thing, supporting that with documentation that your reasonable person would accept makes all the difference. That case took about a year and a half.
And again, because we're trying to prove that it was non-willful disclosure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means we still have to do all of the disclosure work to make sure that we're avoiding criminal penalties and just are paying the civil penalties.
Right, and that's a civil penalty of 5% rather than much higher criminal penalties financially and possible criminal penalties. And this is something not everybody knows. It is used every now and then. Paul Manafort, one of the charges he went to prison for was FBAR violations.
Okay.
So that was in the news a few years ago, but they do put people in prison over this.
Not great to lose freedom over something that is not taxable even. It's just a disclosure.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for those examples. What kind of success have you had? Have you had instances where penalties were waived or, any crazy stories like that?
Yes. So the Russian account I mentioned earlier, they had a different program called voluntary disclosure program, and he'd gone to another firm. And the easy thing was, under the voluntary disclosure program, which again, they can't stop doing that probably about 8 years ago. This other firm had said, okay, we'll pay a 20% penalty. We don't have to argue willfulness. And it's done. And they had him pay $20,000 to the IRS. It's roughly $100,000 that came into his account and left in a week. And then he came to us and said, did I really get a good deal there? I'm like, no. He could have done the streamline for 5%, 5,000. I said, worst case scenario, we'll do that, but I've got to claw this back first. I clawed back the 20,000 from the IRS, presented his arguments, shared the situation, and he didn't even have to pay the 5%. Now, that is thinking outside the box. That is not playing by the rules. So don't think that's going to be your typical case. But the other case I had similar to that was the I mentioned the case in China, $800,000 liability, $42,000 penalty. But the story behind it is what mattered. It was charity money being used to help poor villagers, etc., get education, get housing, and remote areas of China. But because China doesn't allow non-citizens to hold bank accounts, there was a Dutch investor investing money through my client who had Chinese American citizenship, and all the money was in accounts just in her name, not the money, not in the name of the charity. And she couldn't even grasp at first that she had legal control of the money. I'd ask her if you could go if you went and decided to buy a Porsche in China, what would stop you? And she goes, "Well, I would never do that." I was like, "Legally, could you? Did you have sole control of that account?" It's like, "Well, yes, but I would never do that." It's like the IRS doesn't look at it that way. If you have control over it, you're responsible. So we proved up that it was charitable money. We got the contract from the Netherlands. We got the receipts for the charity and the properties they had purchased and sold in Mandarin. And we proved up what had happened with the charity. And they were trying to bring the money back and get it back to the Netherlands, but she could only withdraw 50,000 a year due to Chinese banking regulations. So again, it was a financial mess, but someone had a heart over there at the IRS, and they refunded the entire $42,000 penalty.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so that's why the story matters. Being able to explain it, what's actually going on here. Technically, it wasn't her money, but legally it was, and she had full control and access over it.
Yeah. So we talked about in the beginning, we talked about who's required to file FBAR. How does a client continue to stay compliant after we've gone through a streamlined resolution process?
Well, as we go through the streamlined resolution process, when we worked with your firm on quite a few of these, we make sure there's already connection because we have to amend past tax returns. And you surely have that connection. You're talking to your CPA, they know what your situation is. Um, and we work hand in hand with the CPA to make sure that they're taken care of, that they know what to do moving forward. And as you mentioned a couple of times, it's just a reporting requirement. The forms to report it are fairly simple. You just have to have a CPA that knows what they're doing, has that experience. If you talk to a CPA that doesn't, call OCPA.
Yeah. You and I had a good chuckle earlier about the amount of time that it would take to complete, this process. And I know part of it is because it's really difficult for me to be an effective tax practitioner if I can't get documentation from the client who is trying to get it from the bank and that sort of thing. Um, but also, there's a lot going on with the Internal Revenue Service right now, right? Uh, there's a lot of slow processing issues for us. Is that the same thing on the FBAR side for the FinCEN side?
As far as getting the amended returns submitted, no. This is one of those exceptions where we are not waiting on the IRS. We pull transcripts, which actually we can pull quicker than ever using a new service that we started in December. Um, the real holdup is making sure we get all the bank statements, putting it together. And ironically, when we submit this to the IRS, we're not contacting them beforehand. We put the entire package together with all the amended returns, any unfiled returns, and the streamlined application with the legal arguments that go with that. And we submit in one package. And no news is good news. We don't want to hear back from them. I have had a couple cases where the IRS has reached out to us after filing it and they just wanted some clarification or additional documents, but it's only happened a couple times. We submitted it right away, and then we didn't hear anything else. So again, it's a little bit different where there's no confirmation from the IRS. We make sure they receive it. It's always sent certified. And if we don't hear anything back, that's great.
Perfect. So if someone might have recently discovered that they have unfiled FBARs and they've done a little bit of Google searching and they're very scared of what might happen, what advice would you give that person today?
Call a tax professional that is familiar with FBARs. You call OCPA, they'll go over things with you. They'll make sure that you have the right documents. They'll connect you to a firm like ours here at Guardian Tax Law. We do a free consultation. We're not going to put you in a high pressure sales situation. I've sat down and explained the FBAR procedure to individuals that decided I want to go somewhere else. It's not something I want to address. I'll hide from it. Um, people make all kinds of decisions based on their personal interests, but we don't sit there and tell them you have to do this. We lay out all of your options. We explain everything to you, and we pride ourselves on being part of a big part of our job is to inform people of what their rights and options are. So that takes a lot of the worry and the stress off of your shoulders as to are they going to come and seize my house and seize my property tomorrow? No, it's a process. If they do start investigating you, you'll know. But on the other hand, you do want to get ahead of this before they start investigating as well.
All right. My last question for you is, I'm not going to name any names, but we all listen to the radio from time to time. We've already talked about how another reputable tax attorney had filed the case for the Russian client that you had with the $100,000, and you were able to claw that back and pay 5% instead of 20%. So what makes Guardian Tax Law different? Why should a client come and see you? We've talked about the free consultation, and it's not a high pressure sales situation, which I know to be true of some other firms. So, in your opinion, what makes Guardian Tax Law separate other than what I know? What will we communicate to folks? Why should they choose Guardian Tax Law over someone else? Sorry, that was a bit of a word salad.
No, that's fine because you know you're going to get your answers straight. We pride ourselves on being ethical and honest and direct with clients. We sit there and answer your questions. We take the time, and you're talking directly to an attorney. Most people you call in, you're talking to a sales team, and again, they have goals. They're under a lot of pressure themselves to bring people on and just sell them. And most firms are not experts at FBAR filing. This is not what most people do. So you have two options. You can go to your high-end firms that are going to charge you. I've seen $40,000-$50,000 to do FBAR work with, especially with higher dollar cases. Or again, you can call and get a more reasonable price, be able to talk directly to the attorney. And there are companies out there that undercut me, but I don't know what kind of work they're doing or expertise they have because they want to do rock bottom prices. And that's, again, you get what you pay for, but it should be a reasonable, fair price, not um, where you're paying 40, 50,000 on a normal FBAR case. I've never charged anything like that for an FBAR.
Great response. Well, Hubert, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. If a client wanted to get in touch with you, how would they find you?
Our website is guardiantaxlaw.com. Our phone number is 520-485-7371, or we can meet them in person at our offices in Phoenix and Tucson.
Perfect. Thanks again, Hubert.
Thank you, Chad.
Bye-bye.